What's up, nerds? Take a seat in the front of the class, turn your textbook to page 69.
Nice.
Because today you're getting schooled on the classic Destroy archetype in this installment of...
I'm never coming back to school! Never!
So the syllabus for today will be game plan, card choices, potential replacements and flex cards, how to snap with the deck. Then we'll take a look at a few example games and walk through each plays and why they were made. Let's just jump right in with the game plan of Destroy. So the main way this deck wants to win is with a huge null and a cheap or free death. Now, of course, this game plan comes along with destroying your destroy targets repeatedly throughout the game, which gives you value outside of just having a single death and a single null being played. But when you pair that free death and that big null with the power you've gotten on board via your Venom and Carnage plays, and it's a really good way to just close out games. The second best way this deck can win is just with a big Deadpool paired with a cheap or free death. Deadpool is an excellent destroy target. It's one of the better ones, at least when you draw it early. But when you have a hand that has Forge, Deadpool, Death, and some destroy cards, you usually just want to go for the biggest Deadpool you can alongside a cheap death. And then the third best way this deck wins is just accumulated value of destroying your cards. Now that value can come from Killmonger, killing a couple of their 1-drops, which gives you a nice little cushion to win. But mostly this comes through having, a Wolverine, an X-23, and Deathlock, Venom, Carnage, and Killmonger all played out in that game. Your Wolverines get pretty big, your Venoms get big, and you get plenty of energy from your X-23 blowing up, which lets you play out a death early. Maybe it's not free, but maybe you play it on turn 4, which is a pretty good play anyways. And then you're holding down the other lanes with like a 6-8 power Wolverine and, let's just say 10 power Venom. Honestly, the majority of your wins kind of come with the tertiary condition here, but it's not the best way to win. But as you all know, variance is a bitch, and sometimes you just have to win by playing your cards out and getting value from them. And that's what this deck is actually pretty good at doing. Alright, down to the card choices. Now, a lot of these are obvious, but we will go through each of them to explain why they're there. For destroy targets, which is the cards we're looking to destroy repeatedly, are Deadpool, Wolverine, and X-23. It is worth mentioning that Bucky Barnes is not really in destroy decks anymore. He used to, but ever since Wolverine's change, people have found that just destroying your Wolverine multiple times is often better than just getting that 6 power from Bucky Barnes. Bucky Barnes definitely has a place in destroy lists, but they're not the Deadpool version. Now, our destroy activators, our cards that actually do destroying, are Venom, Carnage, and Killmonger. I left out Deathlock because Deathlock is technically a flex card in modern destroy decks. As far as your support cards go, these would be Forge and Nico Minoru. Nico is pretty critical in destroy nowadays because of the different spells, particularly the one that gives +2 power to the next card you play, being a backup Forge basically to make Deadpool bigger, and the effect that destroys the next card you play to draw 2 cards. That spell in specifically is probably the best play this deck can have. Because not only are you doing a destroy effect like Carnage or Venom, but you're also drawing 2 cards, which basically means if that spell pops up on your Nico and you play a Wolverine out, let's say, the turn afterwards, then it essentially guarantees that you're going to get a lot of destroy triggers happening, and you're probably going to get a free death or a giant null. And the last section here is payoffs, which are null and death. I guess you could consider Deadpool a payoff. He's more like a decent target. You're more likely to get Deadpool to like 4 or 8 power than you are to have Deadpool be like a giant card like Null. Now we'll get into a couple of the cards I left off, like I didn't mention Deathlock and Lady Deathstrike here in the card choice section, because technically they are flex slots. So destroy decks are pretty tight, meaning you don't really have a lot of room to play around with your card choices. But I think these cards on screen here are basically your options. That's the limit of them. So some destroy decks forego the Deathlock to put in Hulkbuster, trying to get a bigger Deadpool or a bigger Wolverine, rather than having the extra destroy trigger. I personally don't think that's correct, because your extra destroy trigger is more valuable in my opinion, because if you take out your Deathlock, then you only have Carnage, Venom, and Killmonger to destroy stuff with. And if you don't draw one of them, you kind of end up being a little weak during your plays. So I prefer having Deathlock over something like Hulkbuster. But if you're trying to get like super big Deadpool and you want to play something like Taskmaster, then Hulkbuster is a pretty good option there. The second flex slot is the Lady Deathstrike slot. This is basically the most flexible slot. Some people do Shang-Chi, pairs really well with your Killmonger, also makes your Null and Death cheaper and bigger. Or they do things like Arnim Zola instead of Lady Deathstrike. And the idea behind that is you play out your X-23 like on turn 3 or 4, you destroy it on turn 4, and then on turn 5 you can play out your Null, and then on turn 6 you can play out your Arnim Zola. I don't particularly like that route because with X-23 and Wolverine you never know where they're going to flip and end up in. So sometimes that kind of ruins your Arnim Zola play. Like if your Wolverine flips into your Null lane and then you play your Arnim Zola, you got a 50-50 chance of hitting the correct card there. It's just not worth it in my opinion. And then the last option here is Elaheh instead of the Lady Deathstrike. This is basically a tempo play. If you were going to play Elaheh, that's actually when you would want to bring in the Bucky Barnes over something like Wolverine or Deathlock even, because you're just looking to get ahead on board like quickly, just destroying the Bucky Barnes, getting that 6 power, and then not really trying to get a bunch of destroy triggers. It would probably be a replacement for Deadpool actually, but you're just looking to get ahead and then play out Elaheh on the last turn of the game, perhaps with a free death. And the last thing I'll say is I like Lady Deathstrike because it gets rid of little annoying cards that you don't really think about off the top of your head, but in game, it comes in clutch. It's also a decent Killmonger backup. It's also a great target with Forge, but it's definitely, I would say, the weakest card in this list. But when she's good, she's really good. All right, some general rules on when to snap and when you should feel confident about being able to. Now, the first thing I will mention here is actually point 3 here is don't snap before all 3 locations reveal. And point 4, don't snap before you know what the opponent's deck is, because Destroy can fold to a lot of different tech cards and specific decks. So if you have like point 1 here says a good mix of activators and targets in hand, that's a snappable hand, but I would wait until after turn 3, because what if you're snapping into a Sarah Tech deck and one of the locations on the board is unfavorable, and you're kind of screwed because Destroy is weak to that deck. So always wait until you know what the locations are and you know what the opponent's deck is. The second thing is it's similar to the good mix hand, but if you have, for example, let's say Forge, Deadpool, Nico, and Carnage in hand, you can be pretty confident you could snap there. So yeah, that's the general gist of snapping with this hand is oh, I guess there's another one I left off is a great Killmonger. Say you're playing against a Zoo deck and you know your Killmonger is going to go off and wipe half their board. That's a pretty good snap. And of course there's location snapping, like if Altar of Death or if Death's Domain pops up, you can snap pretty confidently. I still would wait until turn 3 because you don't know what the opponent's doing. And you want to maybe be able to rope them into 2 to 4 cubes instead of just snapping and having them leave for 1 cube. Alright, we are into the example games. Right off the bat, we get an awkward location with Gamma Lab. It's awkward because with stuff like X-23 and Wolverine, you never know where that's going to end up. But we do play X-23 there because at least I know I'm going to put the Carnage there because Carnage is better than a Hulk. Duh. Mojo World, also super awkward. Pretty much can't win that location ever with Destroy, because you're destroying your cards and they go away. Anyway, I play Carnage at Gamma Lab. X-23 pops up at Gamma Lab. That's super great. If it goes somewhere else, we'll live. Opponent plays a Maximus into the blind location, which is a little weird. Gotta wonder why he's doing that. And then here we draw Deadpool, so we have a good curve of Deadpool into Killmonger, and we put Killmonger into the Gamma Lab because it's better than a Hulk. I mean, a Hulk is better than Killmonger. And if X-23 pops over into Gamma Lab, great. That's pretty much the location 1. You know, barring a Shang-Chi. And if it doesn't, it's fine. We still have Deathlock and we can make use of the X-23 at other locations. And they play Quake in the middle, which is definitely a curveball. Kind of screws up my whole playlines up into this point. But luckily our X-23 stays at Gamma Lab, which gives us a Hulk to match his Hulk, which we can work with. All that could have gone a lot worse, especially with that Quake. Are we drawn to the Venom? We have Nico on the Destroy spell, which is pretty much want to use that every time it comes up. And I think at this point I'm thinking I can't win Mojo World, so let's just slam stuff at Gamma Lab and Baxter Building. And we're eating the Hulk to make our null bigger and death as cheap as possible. And we draw 2 cards, super great spell. And we draw into the Lady Deathstrike, which is pretty much our saving grace in this game. Seems weird to say, but Lady Deathstrike is probably our best shot at winning Mojo World whatsoever. He plays Morph, gets a death, not good for us. And at this point, we have to decide whether we want to contest Baxter Building or try to pull off like a little sneaky win with Lady Deathstrike at Mojo World, and then try to win Gamma Lab as the second location. As you can see, I'm initially thinking just add 16 power to Baxter Building. We can contest against Death, but then that locks us up all of our power at Baxter Building, and he could still win it. He would have another turn to be able to get like another 6 or 7 power there and win. So it's sort of awkward considering what my hand is. I have a cheap death, a decent Deadpool, but I just go for the Deathstrike at Mojo World to kill his Quake. The thought here is that if I kill the Quake, it means he has to invest 4 cards in the Mojo World if he wants to win it, and have a cheap death to buffer the Gamma Lab. So what we go for here is basically forcing him to dump his whole hand at Mojo World if he wants to try to win this game at all. So yeah, we go Deadpool, and then 2 more small cards at Mojo World. I'm counting on the fact that he can't put 4 cards there, and then we play Death at Gamma Lab to buffer over there. This play does lose to a Shang-Chi, but we got lucky and we got away with it. GG. Alright, second example game here. Aunt Maze is the first location, and we don't really have any good things to play into Aunt Maze, except for X-23, so we just do that now before something weird happens, and you don't want to count on drawing a Deadpool next turn, so we just go and get that over with. And we draw into a Venom, awkward hand at this point. The Nico spell is pretty much unusable, so we just pass. Now, this Nico spell is great, and it's the one that adds a copy of the next card you play into your hand. So this spell is fantastic with Venom, so we just stack the middle location here, planning on playing Venom as the next card, getting another copy into our hand, which will be huge, which will let us then destroy our Wolverine or X-23 again. We draw Forge, and we play that after Venom, so we can basically buff up the Lady Deathstrike if we want to next turn, or if we draw into something like Deadpool, it will add power to that card. We don't really care about Forge adding power to Venom, so that's the thought behind that. Get a nice 3-12 in our hand, not bad. Looks like the opponent is playing a high Evo Affliction deck, and those decks usually don't run Shang-Chi, so that's just not crossing my mind at all. I'm pretty much just playing wherever I want, without any fear of retribution, basically. So my initial thought here is to buff up the Deadpool and play Lady Deathstrike, but he hit it with the Scorpion, so our Lady Deathstrike is only at 3 power, so our Deadpool wouldn't get destroyed. It would only kill his Nebula. So we go ahead and buff up the Deadpool and play our second Venom there. This more or less locks up Baxter Building for us. We got a pretty giant Venom, a cheap death. He's going to have to invest a lot to try to win that location back from us. And we draw into the Null, which is a pretty sick draw, because now we have the option of going Null or just Deadpool into death. But since there is a turn 7, we can just go ahead and play the null out. And like I said, I'm not worried about Shang-Chi. So if you just play null at Baxter Building here, they just really can't win that location anymore. And if that's the case, that means our Deadpool and death should easily be able to steal a second location. So yeah, we're ahead at 20 at Baxter Building. He can't really do much. And we just start throwing our cards out to seal the deal. Alright, game 3's up. I got Bifrost as the first location. Doesn't really matter. It's just whatever. But we have Deadpool first. We play that first for sure. Because if we want the option, we can just Carnage it immediately. But our Carnage gets hit by the Icebox. So we play out the X-23, planning on just playing Deathlock next turn. Alright, this dude Wasp our Deadpool is absolutely rude play. I can't believe he did that. Basically means our Deadpool is never going to get above 0 power unless we forge it or something. Yeah, we just play out the Deadpool now because Carnage can get bigger than Deathlock. So Deathlock's just a more efficient and better power play. Alright, so it looks like we have a high Evo Lockjaw deck on our hands. And the Bifrost is about to hit, and he has Lockjaw in the middle, which means he's going to slide into Sanctorum and probably win that. So I just go for blowing everything up on the left, and can't really figure out what to do because I don't know where my stuff's going to end up. And obviously, I mean, why wouldn't it work out like this? But all my stuff goes in the middle, making it to where I can't destroy them again next turn because they will be in Sanctorum. And he's got Jane Foster, so pretty much lose that location. But a nice little draw there. We draw into the reverse Iron Fist spell, basically, for Nico. So here, I go for Nico into death, which lets us shimmy on into Sanctum Sanctorum and basically steal that location. Now that we move death over into there, he can't win Sanctorum anymore. So the game basically just got flipped on its head with that play. And now with Sanctorum being locked up, all I have to focus on is winning the middle or stealing the left somehow. But we have a terrible draw on the last turn of the game. It's just Forge into Venom, basically. And we're just hoping that's enough. And yeah, the opponent decides to retreat. Alright, I hope this video helped you guys learn about Destroy a little bit more. It's one of my favorite archetypes. It's a nice budget-friendly deck. A lot of players can play this no matter where you are in the collection track. And it's fun. Just blowing stuff up on the board is always fun. It's always fun to get a big Null and a big Deadpool, so good times. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe. It's a little work for you, but for me it means a whole lot. But for now, I'm out. Later, nerds.